Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Forgotten Fables Wolves on the Westwind. So, in the last episode, we had a gigantic battle that broke out. We felled many a foe, and we also confronted the Peaceless. We dealt with some magic as well, but we managed to get through it. As you can see, barely. we still managed to get through it, though, so that's the important part. So, to pick up where we left off, we are back home, or at least we're back in town again. So, it must already be early the next morning when you finally trudge into the hetman's hall. The journey back to Islisfeld was much slower than the journey to Yalvik. You're tired and hungry, and you're still left with an uneasiness that you spent the hours long walk trying to shake. All in all, after 2 consecutive nights of exhaustion, you're looking forward to a good night's sleep. The hetman is sat at the table chatting quietly to one of his warriors when your small band approaches. His face falls when he sees the prisoner Raskier drags behind him, now conscious and nonchalant in his defeat. He and the warrior both stand with their hands straight to the pommels of their swords. But Ulfgar's face quickly changes when he sees the others you have brought with you, their lives in ruin. He listens carefully, somberly, and respectfully as the Varnum townsfolk tell their story. He tells them the Runjas have been kind to them, and that the ordeal is now over, and he wishes them well. Then he asks the warrior who sat with him to escort them to a longhouse until the sun has risen. As soon as the doors close behind them, his expressions become thunderous. He turns on the prisoner you have brought with you, who, after staying quiet for so long, returns the look with a cruel smile. "How dare you darken my doorstep? I should slay you where you stand, here and now." The outlaw grins toothily at the hetman, but says nothing. Ulfgar barks at Estrid, who tenses visibly. "Explain yourself. We need answers, father. The Peaceless, gathering here like they did, kidnapping townspeople on the open road, allying with this sorcerer. We need to know whether they could be of further threat, and we can't if they are all dead. So you brought the danger into our home." "I told you." "Oh, enough out of you. Father, I ask you to consider this carefully. He's the only survivor. We can still cut off the head of the snake, but only once it's spoken." Estrid's right, Hetman. You have an opportunity here to keep your community well defended. Estrid gives you an appreciative nod before she turns back to her father. The hetman looks down at his daughter in grave thought for a long moment before he sighs. He looks at Raskier and tilts his head to indicate walking the prisoner away. Raskier snarls and lashes out at the prisoner, throwing him back towards the hall's entrance. Estrid, meanwhile, has bowed her head low, though you are not sure whether it is in regret or in defeat. "You cannot just do things like this, Estrid. It's not our way. If you had asked me first." He speaks far more softly now, but it doesn't make Estrid's response any less pained. She looks back up at the far wall, keeping her expression stony. "I'm sorry, father." He grimaces, saying nothing for a long moment before he dismisses her silently. She bows her head first to him and then to you, and follows her brother towards the front door. He quickly turns to you and puts his hand behind his back to address you professionally. "Regardless of the end result, I must thank you for your help today, Outlander. You've done us a great service." "It's the least I could do." Or, "It's the least I could have done, Hetman. Now we are even." "Bah, I don't care much for keeping scores settled, Outlander. That said, of course you will be paid. I will see to it tomorrow morning. I wondered whether you would consider staying one more night. I'm holding a feast tomorrow, little more than political nonsense, but you're more than welcome to stay." He considers you for a long moment, and after his performance at breakfast, it doesn't take you long to become a little suspicious. "Is it foretold by the runes?" Ulfgar laughs and grins. "No, at least not that Bran has told me." Your immediate expression gives you no reason to believe he's lying, and you find yourself considering the offer. You've been on the road for a long while, and one day would hardly hurt. And besides, You have a strange, nagging feeling in the back of your mind. Somehow, it feels right. Fine, I will stay one more night. I look forward to it. He raises his hand in celebration, then clasps and rubs them together. Good decision. Then I bid you good night, Outlander. And tomorrow we shall feast. Okay, so I've gotten all my strength back, but my health has not completely returned. That's very interesting. A moment of reflection. Before the feast begins, you have some time to yourself to reflect upon the last day and to prepare for what comes next. You rather hope that a night's sleep would feel better than it does. It takes over an hour for you to even fall asleep, and then your dreams are chaotic and disruptive. The battle plays through in your head over and over again. Each time it plays out differently, and never how you would expect. Silly mistakes, bad decisions and strategy, horrible misfortune. None of it makes sense. And all of it is accompanied by the nervous disquiet deep in your chest, a feeling you just can't shake. Something familiar that you rather wish weren't. When morning comes, you are glad you don't have anywhere to be until nightfall. Your injuries still niggle at you, causing you to ache terribly. Yet more proof, if any were needed, that your age is starting to catch up with you. As you're getting ready in the light of day, you notice for the first time how filthy your clothes actually are. Your tunic and trousers were already covered in mud from your flight from the Peaceless, but now they're bloody too. You should really take the time you have to clean up a little bit. It might be appreciated if you were a little more presentable for the feast you were personally invited to. I'm guessing if I were to find breakfast, then that would give me my health back. But I'll go ahead and clean my clothes. With a sigh and a groan as you stretch, you feel a sense of obligation to your host. You finish getting dressed, wincing and complaining as you press at your bruised body. You ask a warrior from your longhouse where you might be able to wash yourself in your clothes. He gives you directions to a spot on the bay, beyond where the longships are beached. Your walk there is very pleasant. Once again, the air crisp and rich with salt. The breeze helps wake you up, and though your stomach still grumbles, you start to feel just a bit better. The beach is already very busy, and many longships are being rowed onto the pebbles and secured. You see many colorful shields of different designs and hear people shouting and yelling at each other. But then it all gives way to tranquil quiet and a pebble beach that looks out into the Gulf of Prim. The ocean is calm and quiet, and a beautiful deep blue that is soothing to look at. And along the beach there are townsfolk standing in the shadows, cleaning weapons and washing clothes. It seems a communal experience, and so you unabashedly join them by the water. As you're scraping some of the dry blood and dirt off the fabric of your tunic, you notice you're being watched. A young child is giving an excited look to some of the bigger scars on your chest and arms. Given their culture, you reckon it is less about the scars themselves and more curiosity about how you got them. Smile at the child. You smile at the child and nod your head in a muted greeting. The child enthusiastically grins and waves at you. When their mother notices, she smiles and then steers the child away from you with some rushed Thorwillian. That look on the child's face sticks with you for a little while as you continue your work. It reminds you of the life you once tried to make for yourself, away from the battlefield. A life of peace and genuine joy. With someone who thought the world of you. Such a long time ago now. In the afternoon, you decided to do some training to combat the aches and pains with physical exercise. You lap the town once and then twice before you start to break a sweat. In the square outside the hetman's hall, there's a solitary tree that you can use to practice your sword work. There, you practice all the techniques you know, one after another, with all the same discipline you learned so many years ago. It draws the attention of some passerby, which you ignore with relative ease. It's only when you see Estrid approaching you from the hetman's hall that you stop your practice. You didn't just teach yourself to fight, did you? I was a soldier. For a while, a long time ago. You fight like one. Have you been fighting ever since? No, not quite. She seems to realize you won't say anything more than that and nods in gentle understanding. Would you like to spar? For a short while? Firstly, she pulls a small bag from a hook on the back of her belt and throws it at you. You drop your sword into your other hand in order to catch it cleanly, recognizing the familiar weight of coin. Thank you for your service. She bows her head politely, but then gives you a genuine smile. I would join you, if you don't mind. It has been a while since I had fought someone from outside Thorwall. Of course, it'll be good practice for us both. She returns a few moments later with her own sword, warming up her wrist by twisting it around in front of her. It's a hard fight. You aren't sure whether it's because she needs to vent or because she's trying to show off Thorwillian fighting skill. But it is certain that she isn't holding back, pressing you onto the defensive with relative ease. Let me do battle sense first. Before you can be caught completely off guard, you start paying attention to her footwork. It acts as a tell, hinting at where she will strike from next and allowing you to parry and strike back cleanly. A few times this happens, frustrating her more and more into speeding up her attacks. No matter how quickly she moves, once you are in a rhythm, she simply cannot get past your blocks. Eventually, she throws down her sword and breathes in deeply, shaking her head in defeat. You must show me how you do that. There's no teaching that, it's just experience. When you know the techniques off by heart, you can focus on other things. I'll keep that in mind. It's always good to learn something from an opponent. What might I learn from you? Your disarm is a bit stilted. I've seen that before in southern fighters. You scowl at her and she smirks, retrieving her sword. It's slow. While you try to make a grab for the weapon, your opponent can use their elbows or knees to disrupt you. My way, you can attack again straight away, and they'll never know what hit them. Interesting. Show me. You haven't had the opportunity to learn something new as a student for quite some time. It's almost refreshing in and of itself, but you can tell straight away that the maneuver is also a useful one. First, Estrid shows you the problem with the method of disarming you already know. As you stop short to tear her sword from her hand, she gently elbows you in the face and stomach. See? You've exposed the entire right side of your body. I can hit you anywhere. I see. If they have another weapon or they stun you with a fist, the fight is already over. It's not just about removing their weapon, but also taking them off guard. She then walks you through her own method, side by side and step by step. It's not dissimilar, and you are sure you've probably performed the maneuver by accident at least once. The simple difference is that instead of catching the weapon itself, you catch the weapon arm. Then, they have very little choice but to let go. A human arm is not supposed to bend that way. And then, you keep going. Keep stepping forward, so that they stay off balance. Exactly. That's the real distraction. They can't hit you with a broken arm and while they're flailing. Try it against me now. She once again stands opposite you, preparing herself to attack. You parry her attack twice in order to get into rhythm, and then move in for your first attempt. So this gives me a new ability, Disarm. Disarm allows Auric to quickly and effectively remove a weapon or other objects from the grip of an opponent, giving him significant advantage in combat situations. As she sends a powerful downward strike towards you, you twist your own sword out of the way. With a careful sidestep, you catch her arm at the wrist in one hand and at the elbow in the other. Without stopping, you start to twist until Estrid gives an uncomfortable growl and the sword falls from behind her. And I got an achievement for that. While she's defenseless, you feign punches at her gut and head, then step past her and release her arm. Well done. You picked that up quickly. I have a good teacher. She notes the comment with a coy smile. Estrid. The two of you turn to see Raskir making his way towards you from the hetman's hall. He gives you a curt nod and a wave as he approaches, which you return respectfully. Father is asking for you, some final preparation for this evening. She looks up to find the sun and gauge the time, then quickly back towards you. I suppose I shall see you at the feast this evening, Outlander. Until then, thank you. She bows her head one last time and follows her brother away, leaving you to think about what she's taught you. It's never too late to learn. That was something your army instructors were fond of saying. Perhaps Bran was right after all. Perhaps there was a reason for you to stay in Alisfell. And who's this guy? He looks like a Stark. Gods and monsters. When the time comes, you go to the Hetman's Hall to feast among the Thorwallers of Alisfell. But it's not too long before you are met by some unexpected guests. Of course it was going to turn bad. Is this going to be like a red wedding situation? When the sun hangs low in the western sky, you make your way back to the Hetman's Hall. The square outside is busier than you've seen it before. Merchants, warriors, and other travelers meet and greet each other before pouring into the hall. It's an excited atmosphere, and you find yourself grinning quite genuinely as you're greeted by people you've never met before. And the hall itself is yet more vibrant and colorful too. The central hearth roars, scattering light across the banners, trophies, and vines that adorn the walls and rafters. People talk merrily and laugh over stories, moving up and down and between the tables as they please. There's already plenty of mead and wine and ale being passed about, brewed both in Thorwall and abroad. At the side of the room, a skull tells a rousing tale of adventure, and a nearby small band plays too. And not too far away from the entrance, you spot Raskier in deep conversation, laughing and grinning. When he sees you, he immediately grins and beckons you to join him, wishing his friend farewell. Outlander, would you care for a drink? I'm gonna be the temperate man in this one and not drink. No, thank you. He shrugs and finds a jug to refill his own tankard. Come, my father will want to know you've arrived. He takes you through the center of the hall, warming you with a blazing fire. Some fish and a few herd animals are being spit roasted over it, and you breathe deep the smell of cooking meat. At the head of the room, Ulfgar is actually sat on a table, deep in conversation with Jostled. Bran sits quietly at the corner of the table too, watching the people mill around the room. When Ulfgar sees you, he jumps up and spreads his arms wide, smiling merrily. Outlander, welcome! He wobbles as he steps down into the floor, and then vigorously raises his goblet to you. He takes a large gulp and indicates the festivities to you. What do you think? I'm impressed, Hetman. Excuse me, I'm very impressed, Hetman. You know how to throw a feast. That I do. With that, he quickly turns back to Jostle. I'll catch up with you later, Jostle. Raskier, where's Estrid? She's talking to the warriors from the Varmhog for you, father. Oh, right. He looks hurriedly across the room until he finds the group he's searching for, then charges off to greet them. Estrid sits in conversation with them, wearing a headband very similar in design to her father's. When he arrives, she makes a show of introducing the two parties to each other, very diplomatically, excuse me. I mean, it's not an odd time for politics. I mean, this is pretty much the best time for politics. Why the headband? Why is Estrid wearing the headband? She's considered to be our father's heir, expected to be elected as headwoman after he dies. She thinks it helps our allies get used to the idea that one day she'll be in charge. Head people are elected? I didn't know Thorwillian head people were elected. It wasn't always so. We still expect at least one of a het person's children to put their name forth when the time comes. With the hetman now in deep conversation with the warriors, Estrid excuses herself from the discussion. She makes her way over to the head table, picking a goblet off the table to drown its contents into one swig. Only then does she join the two of you, smiling broadly as she refills her goblet. I hope you're having a pleasant evening, Outlander. So far, so good. Excellent. To a good evening, then. People come and go past the head table over the next half an hour or so. Most are from Alisfell, Some are from wider Thorwall, and some even come from Nostria or the Mitten realm. Ulfgar even introduces you to a Talmudian, a mage with some business further north in Olbort. When they learn your profession, many of the Thorwallers ask you to tell them tales of your adventures over the years. Some are disappointed to learn that your life has not been as exciting as they might perhaps expect. You are all just sitting down to finally eat when the doors to the hall swing open once again. They open with so much force that everyone takes note, and the festivities come to a lingering halt. Stood in the doorway are two men, both ragged and weathered, and aware that everyone is looking to them. The first of them acknowledges the stares, looking up and down the tables, nodding when he makes eye contact. The second only has eyes for Ulfgar, ignoring everyone else who watches him across the room. Your eyes flick quickly to the tremendous twin-headed great axe he carries easily in one hand. And then they are both in front of you, standing just in front of the step up to the table. You find yourself swallowing nervously as they look up at everyone seated at that table. Then the hetman stands to greet them, putting a fist to his chest in a salute. Welcome, it's been a long time, Olvir Eriksson. As the hetman speaks this name, whispers break out across the hall. Next to you, Estrid splutters on her drink. You glance across as she stands, and Raskier leans forward in his seat as well, as if to get a better view of the visitors. Indeed it has, Ulfgar Farron Jason. You've drawn back into the conversation by the gravely drawl of the taller man's voice. He and the hetman stare at each other for a good few long moments before the second of the pair clears his throat. Thank you for receiving us, hetman. I am Gunnar Ronolfsson. I raid with Olvir. People all across the room start muttering to each other, drawing Gunnar's attention. Olvir, though, just stares forward darkly, keeping his eyes locked firmly on Ulfgar. The hetman stems the muttering with a raised hand, taking a sip of his drink before he continues. I'm glad you've come. I was not sure you would. It has been many winters since I've heard tell of you, Orville. I wasn't sure my message would even reach you. Ulfgar's words seem carefully chosen, and when you glance at Olvir, he seems just as careful to respond. Before he does, Gunnar clears his throat again, rubbing his hands together nervously. Much has changed in those many winters, hetman. Perhaps now is not the time to speak of such things. Ulfgar studies them both for a few more moments before slowly nodding his head and raising his arms to the hall. Agreed. We'll speak later, and you are welcome to eat and drink with us meanwhile. Please sit anywhere you would like. Everyone, it's time to eat. The hetman sidesteps around the head table and then marches to the hearth to help with the preparations himself. The men find seats on one of the closer tables, and slowly and cautiously the room begins to fill with chatter again. You're slightly bewildered by the interruption to the evening's tempo. When you turn to the hetman's children again, they are both still looking at the strangers with curiosity and suspicion. What's wrong, Estrid? She continues to stare for a moment longer before she shakes her head. Wrong? Nothing. It's just, I never thought we'd actually ever meet him in the flesh. Ulfgar calls on a procession of people to help him pass out food and more drinks. Trays and trays of bread, fish, and vegetables, and more jugs of alcohol are all circulated. Then Ulfgar makes his way around the room again, making sure all the guests are comfortable. As he tries to pick spirits back up, Raskier leans across his sister to tell you more about the mysterious man. Olvir Eriksson is a famous raider, outlander, or he was. There are many stories about his exploits, and few of them are good. He's considered a brute and a savage even by Thorwillian standards. Why is he here then? Why is your father receiving him here this evening? I wish I knew. It is custom to invite great warriors to feasts like these. If the stories about Ovir and his raids are true, then they are indeed great. Perhaps that is why. After a moment in which she continues to stare at Ovir silently, Estrid sighs and shakes her head. You may remember greatness in these tales, Raskier. I remember cruelty. The two strangers keep to themselves while everyone starts tucking it into their meals. The mood starts to rise again over dinner. The food is delicious, and the tale acted out by the scald while you eat keeps you all in wondrous suspense. But under the light-hearted joy of the meal, you do get a great sense of uneasiness that wasn't there before. Your eyes keep shifting over to the strangers, who seem completely unmoved by the peace. Many of the guests all across the hall take a moment every now and then to turn and look at the pair, and it doesn't seem to bother either of them in the slightest. The second of them, Gunnar, looks up with his meal every now and then to look around the hall, talking only to his friend. From what you can tell, Ovir himself barely speaks, and doesn't look anywhere other than at Gunnar, and straight ahead. Estrid and Raskier both try to get answers out of their father, but he refuses all questions on the subject. And so, for an hour at least, you eat, drink, and pass the time listening to song, prose, and poetry. And all the while, that uneasiness sits in the depths of your chest, and it makes you more and more restless. As the plates are once again carried away, Ulfgar stands with his goblet held tightly in his hand. Now, some more food will be brought shortly, but first, some toast. I'll pour myself some water. As a guest at the head table, you feel it's right to join in, but to keep a clear head, you pour yourself some water. As Ulfgar begins to talk, your attention is suddenly drawn inwards. It's as if a spike hooks onto the uneasiness that has been building in your chest. It isn't painful as such, but it feels as though something is peeling open inside you, making you feel exposed. Here is to all of you, my friends. Thank you for your company. You hear Ulfgar's words, but you cannot respond to them as your head spins violently. Out of nowhere, your ears are filled with a low, rumbling growl, unmistakably bestial in nature. It claws at the inside of your mind as it becomes a deep and grave chuckle. And as the guests throughout the hall raise their cups to meet hetmans, a deafening crack of thunder rolls. Voices across the hall cry out as the very foundations are shaken by the boom. The hetman staggers, looking up at the ceiling in drunken confusion. As you lose your balance, even sat down, your arm slips and your goblet tilts awkwardly. You expect water to spill across the table and your clothes, but the substance that flows from your cup is the color of deep red. In horror, you stand and drop the cup to the floor, and the floor in front of you is splattered by the liquid. If you didn't know any better, you say that your water had been turned to blood. Before you can do anything else, the room is shaken by another clap of thunder. This time, the chandeliers are rocked by the blast, and people start to cry out in fear. What is going on? We're probably under attack. We're under attack, I think. I'm not sure. No, that's not it. You look across at Estrid and see her staring wearily at the ceiling. From the look on her face, you can tell she's experienced exactly the same thing as you. Again, your attention is drawn away suddenly. The lights of the chandeliers have steadied, but you're sure you see a shadow move across the ceiling. But as soon as it catches your eye, everything lies still. And a moment later, there's another crack as the walls of the hall are shaken a third time. What madness is this? It is no madness, Outlander. You snap around to look at Bran, who is stood completely and utterly still in the chaos. It is a monster. You scowl at the old goatee, confused and angry at his inscrutability. As you feel another low rumble deep inside your chest, you feel dizziness overwhelm you again, and then you freeze at the sound of a very familiar voice. Ulrich? For a moment you are completely and utterly stunned, though the phantom is gone in less than the blink of an eye. You feel, hear, see nothing, and then the loudest crash of thunder yet bellows out across the hall. Again the chandeliers rock, Again, the shadows dart and dance across the ceiling, flickering in and out of existence. As they alight and fade, for a moment you swear they form the face of some monstrous beast, and the thunder rolls into an echoing, horrifying, guttural roar that leaves you reeling where you stand. I don't know if closing my eyes will do any good at this point. I'm just gonna scream. You cry out as you fall to your knees, mirroring many others who cower as the room shakes around them. There's a flash and a moment of complete and utter darkness. A moment of complete and utter silence. And then the room flickers back into existence and you breathe in deep. The hall is how it was, how it always was. It is as though nothing had ever happened. A murmur quickly breaks out across the hall as everyone therein makes sure those next to them are unharmed. What was that? What in the name of all the gods was that? Evil has reawoken here tonight. There are stories, but I was not sure they were true. Bran still looks completely expressionless at the ceiling. It is as though he is waiting for the shadows to move, for the howling to start again. Was it magic? Sorcery? It was a monster. Bran screeches at you, his voice filled equally with worry and excitement. Once again, his head snaps toward the ceiling, and there he stands like a statue for a moment, and then another. Speak, damn it, Bran! Ulfgar totters as he shouts at his advisor, and then collapses into his chair, his hand shaking. His next question is far quieter and far more reserved. What kind of Ragnar skin do you speak of? Your water turned to blood, Outlander. After a moment, he looks out across the room and calls out loudly. Did anybody's drink turn to ash? Slowly, Estrid reaches down to pick her goblet up. With a dark look, she turns it on its head and ash pours from it, billowing up into the air. Ulfgar gasps and pulls at his beard nervously. Anybody else? Silence falls across the hall, and a few guests look around at each other anxiously. In the corner of the room, you see the taller of the two strangers, Ovir, stand and raise his tankard high. And as he turns it, a deep, rich red liquid pours and splatters to the ground. As those closest to him gasp and flinch backwards, he looks at it with a disgusted expression. Water to blood, spirits to ash. 4 strikes of earth-shaking thunder, even when the sky is clear. These are the signs of a great scourge long put to rest, the fiend of the Restless One. The Restless One? Who or what is the Restless One? The archdemon, the enemy of Travia, the Restless One. And the fiend is one of her most dangerous denizens. It haunted Thorwall for years. Bran quickly turns to the hetman, brandishing his walking stick. You should bring a close to the proceedings, hetman. We must consult the Runjas. Ulfgar sits stunned in his chair, looking into space with a look of utter disbelief in his eyes. When Bran snaps his walking stick against the leg of his chair, he jumps and shakes his head. He stands up, coughs, and indicates the door to his audience. My apologies to you all. Please go. Go to your beds and sleep well. Try to put to rest what you have witnessed here today. Slowly his instructions are followed, and people start making for the doors, still muttering and murmuring amongst themselves. At the front of the room, you see Ovir shoulder past someone, racing for the door. No, not you, Ovir Eriksson. This curse has already been visited upon you. You must stay here. You too, Outlander. All of you must come with me. You're taken out of one of the hall's side doors, across the square to a small hut over the way. Bran and Ulfgar lead, with Estrid and Raskir following behind them. You come next, and Ovir and Gunnar follow begrudgingly and silently behind. The hut that Bran leads you into is already a crowded mess, even before 7 of you try to cram into it. You all get in each other's way as Bran bids you to gather around the shallow bowl of small stones in the center of the room. It is an eerie space, lit only by small candles and the distant moon shining through the gap in the roof. It sets the stage rather for the tale the goatee tells. Hundreds of years ago, in the deep north of Thorwall, a dire, a blessed one, was tested by Travia. But Ragnar bade the restless one to corrupt him, and in doing so, the dire failed the test. Stories tell us that over the course of many years, he brought others to his newfound cause, and together that coat brought the fiend into this world. A demonid, which became a terror of the entire North. What's a demonid? I've never heard this term before. Demons themselves cannot exist on this plane for long without being bound to a host. Even with such a binding, they would not have had enough time to put their plans into motion, and so they found a different way. They hunted a great saber-toothed cat, a great predator of the north, and captured it alive. They fused a demon servant of the restless one to the saber-tooth, allowing it to stay here forever. It haunted the lands for over a decade. Those it hunted were driven mad by illusions, chased to the grave by things that were never real. Relatives said that even on their deathbeds, people would scream that they were being hunted by a shadow they could not comprehend. And it always began with a feeling of terrible uneasiness, like its victims were being watched. I felt that. As the hetman was making his toast, I felt like I was being watched. Me too. Expectantly, Bran looks at Olvir, whose eyes shift from person to person as everyone else follows suit. After a moment, the raider rolls his eyes and grinds his teeth, slamming the head of his axe into the earthen floor. This is ridiculous. It's a ghost story from ages past. I won't waste my time on it, and it's not why I'm here. But you did come here. And before you arrived, there was no sign of the fiend in Islesfell. It turned your water to blood, to mark you for the chase. You and it are bound, it seems. As is Estrid, and as is the Outlander. The fiend has found you all, for what reason I cannot say. And if those stories are to be believed, then it will not stop hunting you until you are driven to destruction. There must be a way to stop it. Ulfgar rests his hand on Estrid's shoulder lovingly. The story of the fiend is one Skulls have been telling since the days of my grandfather's grandfather. Centuries have passed without wind or whisper of it. I thought it killed. Killed? No, hetman. The demon with which the saber-toothed cat was melted was not of this world, and so it cannot be killed with iron, or bronze, or steel. But part of the tale is that it disappeared, that a brave warrior hunted it down and trapped it. So it goes that she took one of the saber teeth, and had it blessed by a dyer of Travia, not only as a prize of her victory, but as a weapon to be used by any others who may be hunted by the beast, should it ever be freed from its prison. So we find that weapon and we use it. Olvir chortles, shakes his head, and turns away from the circle. Estrid looks at the ceiling for a moment before she rubs her eyes and groans. That you must. In the silence that follows, Bran scrapes the stones from the bowl before you and places them into a bag. For a moment, he stands in deep thought, but then he nods. What shall become of those marked by the fiend of the restless one this evening? One by one, he takes 3 stones from the bag, keeping them in a closed fist without looking at them. He holds them tightly for a single moment and then throws them into the bowl with an asserted cry. They skitter across the face of the bowl, bouncing and flying about only to be caught by its edge and dragged back towards the middle. 2 land face up, while one comes to a halt on its long edge. With a deep breath, Bran looks into the bowl. All others, apart from Olvir, follow suit, and you are left in awe of the Thorwaller's dedication to 3 simple stones. Bran points to the first, one of those that landed face up. The warrior, or the fight. You will have to face the fiend head on before the end. He hovers his hand towards the second face-up rune. The Otajasko. Perhaps you must fight this foe together, or perhaps more will be brought into the fight. Ovir snorts and shakes his head again, looking around at you all with a spiteful snarl. Meanwhile, Bran presses a bony finger to the third and final rune and tips it so that it is also face up. He tilts his neck up to Ovir, who is pacing in small steps near the door, tapping his fingers against his arm. Downfall. On its side, as it was. This may yet not occur. Perhaps you will fail. Perhaps you will fail if you do not abide by the Runja's other machinations. Perhaps it is the fiend that shall fall. This is still uncertain. I'm not going to say anything. You stew in the Goatee's interpretation of these stones for a good while, unsure of what you should or even can say. The only person who does not seem at all troubled by his words is Brand. He simply waits for you all to process what he has told you, accepting it as the truth. Finally, Estrid sighs, nods her head, and gently takes Ulfgar's hand from her shoulder. Very well. We know what we must do. Estrid, you are to lead Islesfell when I'm gone. I cannot lead Islesfell if I'm driven mad by this creature. I saw it, as clear as day, right before my eyes. I can feel it. It is my duty to face the fiend. The hetman's brow furrows in angst and drunkenness. He is visibly torn and unable to speak. The Runjas have spoken, and the stories are clear, Ulfgar. Should they fail, then they will likely all be driven to destruction, and perhaps the fiend will come for us next. But if they do not even try, I doubt there is any hope at all. The hetman does not react. He is breathing heavily and his hands are shaking. What kind of hetwoman would I be, father, if I did not do everything I can to protect my people from a threat like this? Whether I succeed or fail, I must try. The hetman groans and turns back to Bran. The old man only stares back at him, motionless. The hetman groans again, and this time turns to Ovir and Gunnar, who stand by themselves in the corner of the hut. Will you also see this through to the end? Ovir looks unimpressed, his eyes flickering from person to person as he stumbles over a response. Finally, he looks at Gunnar, but his colleague can only shrug. With a growl and a dark look, Ovir waves his hands dismissively, turning away from you all again. You're still observing the raider when the hetman grabs you violently by the shoulder and pulls you towards him. He looks you straight in the eyes as he breathes hot, alcoholic breaths into your face. You are not one of us, Outlander, not from Islesfell, not from Thorwall. You are not bound by our oaths, nor by our traditions. But I ask you now, no matter what happens, bring my daughter home. Before you say anything, you slowly and carefully pull the hetman's hands from your shoulders and step back. It doesn't give you any time to process anything that has been said since the attack, but you know he expects a response. Sure. I mean, I'm stuck in this now, so I promise. I promise you, Hetman Furin Jason. I will bring your daughter home. My word is a pledge to you, as you would say. The hetman stares at you as he tries to gauge your words. Your own mind is racing too, and straight away you are unsure as to why you said it. You feel it again, that uneasiness that keeps playing at the center of your being. What is going on? You're brought back to reality by Ulfgar, who swallows down his nerves and nods. Where is this weapon, Bran? What do the stories say of it? Very little, as my memory serves. If she truly believed it would be needed again, I do not think it would have been sent out to sea with the warriors. But what happened to it, I do not know. The story says she was from Jarlsinger. Yeah, Jarlsinger. If she died there, perhaps they know what became of it. That is on the west coast of the Primer Peninsula. It will take some time. Then it is fortunate indeed that you have a ship that can make such a journey, is it not, Gunnar Ronolfsson? As they speak, Estrid is talking quietly to her father, but as they finish up, so does she. She stands at her full height and nods respectfully towards the goatee. I will get my things, and we shall head to the shore right away. Pack light. As Gunnar calls after her, those around you start to filter back out of Brand's hut. The last to move, even behind you, is Ovir, who stares into the seer's bowl with his arms crossed. When he notices he is being watched, he growls again and walks past you into the night. Again, you find yourself asking how you managed to find yourself where you have. In the space of 2 days, your life has turned completely on its head. But it isn't the threat of being driven insane that makes you nervous. Strangely, somehow, it's the uncertainty of whatever comes next. Alrighty then, so we now have our overarching quest in order to find this saber tooth so we can use it as a weapon in order to fight this fiend. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it right there, and then in the next episode I guess we'll be setting off on this journey and running into our first quest or whatnot. I know this is a bit shorter of an episode, but I think I kind of want to chop these up into singular missions or maybe several missions depending on how they kind of string themselves together. So we'll see. Maybe in the next episode I can go ahead and depart, maybe get into some battling too. Who knows? We'll see. But if you like the video, like the video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I have a lot of things on the channel, and I will have many other things in the future. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comment section and I will get to them as soon as possible. And if you have any suggestions for games, also leave them there as well. I will give them a look if I feel like they fit something that's on the channel, but I will at the very least give it a look. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.